Hi guys, week number 6, and today we're going to talk about chapter 8, environmental considerations when prescribing exercise. I want to start a little bit by, as I always do, giving you some feedback on what you submitted, and then we'll move forward to what we have for this week. First of all, I want to thank everybody who was able to attend the synchronous meeting. In general, what we covered was, we just shared, we visited, we shared some feedback, positive and negative. And I want to remind everybody that it is about time to start thinking a little bit about your PDO, at least identify the group you're in, that's in the forum, right? Everything is there. And also identify the case study, start talking with each other, and start figuring out what you need to do, who is doing what, and things like that. Okay? It's about time. I want you to be proactive so we don't end up pressing it at the very end. Okay? That's one. Now, concerning what you submitted, LO 13, 87%. And I have my notes here, of course. It was one item I wanted to talk about. I don't know if you remember, chapter 7, we talked about figuring out the METs per minute, per day, or per week, right, as a way to figure out volume, right? So if you go to page 198, you'll see what volume means. Is volume frequency times time, or is frequency times time times something else? Okay, again, think that we talked about METs per minute, per day, or per week in a way to identify and prescribe exercise and figure out volume, right? LO 14, 96%. Very good. I'm very pleased. Concerning an item that had to do with barriers to exercise, go to table 8.2. And there you'll find a lot of information. If you really study table 8.2, you will see, you will figure out the answer by yourselves, okay? And LO 15, even higher, 96%, you killed it. There was no specific item for me to make any comments on. So that's about it about feedback, general feedback. If somebody needs individual feedback, shoot me an email, a message, and I'll reply and be more specific about whatever you may need. Office hours tomorrow from 8 to 12:30. I'm going to include the link in the email. Then I'm going to include this link about this specific Zoom video. Yeah, and chapter 8 for today, which means LO 16 to 18, you have to submit for next week, and I'm going to go ahead and share our Moodle site. So this is what we're going to talk about today, environmental considerations, and this is a chapter 8, and you have LO 16, 17, 18 due on midnight on Sunday. Okay, we're good? All right, I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to go ahead and start covering what we have for today. A lot of information, but I think we'll have fun. So today we're mainly talking about 3 things. Exercising in altitude, exercise in cold environments, and exercise in hot environments. Okay, so let's start with the first one. I want to make sure we all understand that as we ascend to higher altitudes, it's not that there's less oxygen. No. What's happening is there's less pressure. Okay, and because of less pressure, we end up with less oxygen in our arteries. I'm sorry. So again, it's not that the air has less oxygen up there. The pressure is the key factor. That changes everything. Okay. All right. So if we want to categorize altitude, you see that if you remember 1,200 meters and then multiply 2,400 meters, you pretty much have the low altitude and the moderate altitude. We also have high altitude up to 4,000 meters, and above 4,000 meters, we have very high altitude. That's just for us to group a little bit what's going on in those altitudes, okay? All right, so it says here that physical performance decreases with increasing altitude. So that's why we're talking about 1,200 meters, almost 4,000 feet, okay? Because that's the first kind of threshold we have. Okay, above that, we see decreased performance. And of course, the higher we go, right, the more we exercise and the more muscle we have, the more performance, decrease of performance we're going to see. Okay? Think, if you have more muscle, what do you need? More oxygen, right? But the cure here is altitude acclimatization, and we're going to talk about it a lot today. And the more common thing that we see once we try to exercise above 1,200 meters is that we need more time to do the same thing we could do below 1,200 meters. Or because you're getting tired, we're getting tired easier, we need more breaks. Okay. So this is a great table that shows a comparison between altitude and how much tasks the time increases based on the duration of the task. What I want to make sure we all understand those numbers that you see, 0, 0 to 2, 2, and from the left all the way to the right, it goes to, you see that for a task lasting more than 3 hours initially, once you first go there, if you go to very high altitude, you need 200. That 200 is a percentage. So you need 200% of whatever you would need. Like if it was 3 hours, you would need 9 hours. Okay? So, and then it goes down to 90. So again, as you can see, we have more increase. There's a positive correlation between altitude and increase, which makes sense. There's also a positive correlation between altitude. If we keep the altitude the same, the duration of the task, right? And percentage again the increase, which makes sense. All right. AMS, HACE, and HAP. AMS, pretty common. The other two, not so common, especially HACE, and way more serious. The issues happen here, all three of them that are called, they're under the group altitude illnesses, is when the ascent is rapid, especially all the way to high or very high altitudes. So AMS is very common, you see the symptoms, and most people get it, and then after a little bit, especially if they don't do any physical activity, or if they go to lower altitude, it goes away. And again, as you can see, there's a direct relationship between the rate and the altitude, okay? As I said again, if they rest, if they don't do pretty much anything, and if they go lower, that will all help. So AMS symptoms leave that person. Now, as you can see, HACE is very uncommon, right? And we're talking about above 12,000 feet anyway. So AMS could become HACE, and most people have AMS if they don't take care of it and they keep being aggressive, they may get haze. Now, similarly, rare, again, high altitudes. Repeat ascents and descents, and high intensity in exercise increase the probability of developing HIP. And if kratos and rails have to do with sounds our lungs make, so if there's a doctor, and there can be another indication that you have it. Okay. Of course, as you can see, the best countermeasure is give yourself time. Okay. And you need to eat, you need to drink, and you need to stay away from any PA exercise and PA if possible, as possible. If you can descend, even better. Now, prophylactic means that we take something that helps us prevent something. Therapeutic, we take it after it happens. Acetazolamide is common for AMS, right? And again, prophylactic is you get it, so you take the drug in order not to get AMS. And therapeutic is after. So acetazolamide is has to do with pressure, right? Has to do with people who have pressure in their eyes. I don't want to go into detail, but that's what it's usually being used for. Headaches, ibuprofen, in chamber therapy is something that is very efficient. However, when you are up there, it's not very common to have those chambers, although now there are portable chambers. And if you look online, you can find a picture that is like, they look like bags and they can take them with them. Okay? If you are, of course, proactive and if the whole thing is that organized. Prochlorperazine and dexamethasone. Those are, again, help relieve specific symptoms. Same treatment for individuals, descent, oxygen therapy, and hyperbaric. Voluntary BA should not be excessive, obviously. When AMS starts going away or the symptoms, we can resume activities and maybe exercise, training. HR is really important. As you understand, HR is going to go up in the beginning. When it starts going down, that means that you start getting used to it. So you're getting that acclimatization. Okay. So if you want to train in the beginning, because as we said, it's because of the pressure, reduced pressure of less oxygen in our blood, we will need to work harder for the same work. So if we base our training on HR, we can keep basing on HR, but we will reach that point much faster or with much lower intensities. Right? So if it is your goal to work at 85% of HR max, that HR max, because again, of the lower pressure, reduced pressure, but that's a great way, and you should keep everything else constant. HR-based exercise prescription is great. Okay, what I want to talk about here is staging a little bit. So, excuse me, a way to achieve that acclimatization is, instead of going to the altitude that you want to go, you'll see in a little bit, you go somewhere below that and stay a little bit. That helps you get used to the altitude so you can move to the next level. So here, the general rule, as you can see, above almost 4,000 feet and below 14,000 feet, It has to do with how many days you stay at that altitude. And the example says, for example, if you are at 6,000 feet and you stay there for 6 days, if you multiply that days by 1,000, then you get 6,000 feet more. So you can move up to 12,000 feet. Okay, and you'll be kind of in a better shape, right? Because you, as you can see, you can all those sicknesses can be reduced. They're not going to go away. They're going to be reduced because you stayed there. So you kind of got used to an altitude which is above sea level, above 4,000 feet, but below the actual altitude that you want to go to, which was in this case, let's say 12,000 feet. Okay. The best indices of acclimatization: physical performance, decreased heart rate, and increased arterial oxygen saturation. Hope you know what's oxygen saturation. If you don't, go back and go over the material again. Okay, 1 to 2 weeks, most of the time, is kind of enough. We have pulse oximetry, you know, when you just put a clip on your finger, right? And that's a way to measure non-invasively saturated oxygen, arterial. Yeah, nothing really important here. The first few days are crucial, so please, if you could, do no workout and minimize physical activity anyway. As we talked about before, THR, which is target heart rate, is a great way to do exercise prescription. Also, you know, that's another thing. Like, high altitude is one thing. Now, if the environment is really cold, or really humid, or it's really windy, or you're closer to the sun and the angle or whatever of the sun hits you, whatever. So these are additional considerations for you as an athlete or as a coach if you are prescribing exercise. Okay, so we're going to talk about hot and cold environments later on, but high altitude may be that's one thing. That's what I want you to remember. It can be high altitude and cold environment. Okay, so then we need to consider two things. Nutrition, sleep. There's more breaks. We talked about that. Okay. Clothing. Clothing is really important, as you understand. And it has to do with the temperature and the wind. We're going to cover that in a little bit. In education, and no matter what we're doing, high altitude access prescription, cold environments, hot environment, education of the trainees and the trainers is crucial. It's crucial, so we are proactive and reactive. Okay, if something happens. Screening, surveillance, all that's organizational stuff. Okay. Has to do again with awareness of the signs and symptoms. Okay. Team physicians should be there with whatever they need. Cool. All right. That was number one. Let's talk about the second section of this chapter, which is called environments. And before I even start, if you would ask me, as a coach, am I scared more of the cold or the hot environments? I would say hot. And you'll see why. But cold has a lot of things to consider as well. All right. Clothing, body composition, of course, health status, nutrition, aids, exercise intensity. All these have to do with the considerations we have to take, the considerations we need to think about when we're training in cold environments. All right. As you can see, also we have additional scenarios. Urgent rain, low temperature, with wind, all this are important. Hypothermia, we're going to talk about the definition of hypothermia in a little bit. So I wouldn't right now. Of course, if you have additional risk, such as CVD or you have asthma, side note, if it's cold and dry, that's the worst condition for somebody who's asthmatic. So you should know that as a trainee if you have asthma or a coach prescribing exercise. But in general, if you have additional risk, you need to take that into consideration when you're exercising in cold environments. All right. So hypothermia, which is the opposite of hyperthermia, right? And we have two things to consider. We have heat loss and we have heat production. When heat loss exceeds heat production, guess what we have? Hypothermia. When heat production exceeds heat loss, guess what we have? Hyperthermia, which we can talk about in a little bit when we talk about hot environments, right? Environment, including clothing, right, are involved in hypothermia. And here, I'm going to ask you to figure something by yourselves. If not, you can send me an email and I can talk about it. So as you can see, there are other specific factors that increase the risk of developing hypothermia, including immersion, makes sense, rain, makes sense, wet clothing, makes sense, low body fat, makes sense, older age, makes sense, and hypoglycemia. Assuming you know what hypoglycemia is, why don't you try to figure out why is this related to hypothermia? Why hypoglycemia is related to hypothermia? Think about it. If you don't find the answer, let me know. All right, cold induced frostbite, of course, below freezing point 32 Fahrenheit, 0 Celsius is more probable. Exposed skin, of course, hands and feet, that are more very common. You can get a contact frostbite, especially metal. Have you ever tried to touch with your tongue something that is really cold in metal and then see how it gets stuck? All right. The main thing for cold stress. And cold stress can produce a variety of issues, so we're trying to avoid that, right? But it could happen mainly based on three things: air temperature. The lower the temperature, the higher the probability. Wind speed, the higher the speed, the higher the probability of cold stress. And the wetness. The higher the wetness, the level of wetness, the higher the probability of cold stress. Okay? What does the wind do? The wind doesn't make anything colder or warmer. What the wind does is exacerbates heat loss. So we lose heat faster, which leads us to hypothermia faster as well. Okay? So go online, see what the WCT is, and as a coach, because this has to do with temperature, but also speed of the wind, you should take it into consideration. Right? It's not only the temperature that we're interested in. We should be interested in the speed as well. And we just explained why. So here, this is a great figure. And here you see two things. You see a comparison between air temperature and wind speed, right? And those two are related, of course, to frostbite times. And the numbers that you see in those boxes are times, minutes, okay? And as you can see, the lower the temperature and the higher the speed, the faster frostbite could occur, right? So these are two things that we should take into consideration. And you see that when we talk about air temperature of minus 45, for example, all the way to the right, and a wind speed of 60 miles per hour all the way down, you'll see we're going into that deep purple-ish area, and that frostbite could happen in less than 5 minutes. We talked about that. The second bullet point is kind of interesting. So the wind speed that WCT doesn't take into consideration if you're running. So if you're running or skiing really fast, that may make things even worse because it may increase the speed of the wind hitting you, which increases heat loss, which increases the probability of hypothermia. Frostbite cannot occur if the air temperature is above 0 Celsius, 32 Fahrenheit. That's important. Wet skin is not good. So we should be avoiding getting sweaty or getting outside wet. Okay. Increase surveillance below 8 Fahrenheit. Okay. And then we'll have the non-freezing cold injuries. Okay. If they're non-cold, we're talking about temperatures above 0 Celsius or 32 Fahrenheit. Okay. I hope that makes sense. But here we have immersion. We have high humidity in the boots or the glass, right? Heavy sweating. So, but again, that's not good. Trench foot. Go Google, see some pictures of trench foot and sibling. The thing is, don't eat when you do something like that. Trench foot is usually you see feet or the bottom of feet having it. Siblings are usually on the hands, here on the hands or the toes. Okay, fingers. That's the word I was looking for. Prevention: remain active, change socks. Okay, and again, prophylactic treatment. We have use sprays that whatever lower sweat. And it's interesting that in this case, our book talks about aluminum hydroxide antiperspirants against sweating, right? But there's so many objections now about them, including aluminum for other reasons, of course. Anyway, doesn't matter. That's what we should remember here. Clothing. Minimize sweating. Make sure your skin can breathe in a way, right? So it doesn't get really wet. Do not wear an outer layer unless raining or very windy. So you can lose that heat, that extra heat, and you don't become sweaty. Reduce clothing insulation as exercise intensity increases because you're going to have that extra production of heat from your own body because intensity goes up, right? Do not have a single standard for the whole group. If you have, let's say, cross-country team, don't tell everybody how to dress up. Okay, give some advice, but let them also customize it a little bit. And of course, footwear is also important. All right, cold environment. Have you heard about how many people get heart attacks while shoveling snow? It's because of really high intensity activity, right? So we need to be careful. Walking in snow compared in a surface that is not snowy, of course, it requires more energy. I hope you understand that. In swimming in water below 25 or 77 Fahrenheit may be a threat to individuals who have cardiovascular disease because it requires, again, more energy to keep the temperature of the body, and they may not be able to understand that they're getting angina. That puts them at higher risk. And that was about cold environments. Let's go to hot environments, which is the third thing for today. So we kind of have already covered this. We have muscle contractions, and in order to use energy, we break down. We'll talk about it in other courses. We produce heat, and with that heat has to leave our body when that's excessive and we don't need it. Okay, so if everything goes wrong, we'll just dissipate that to the environment by evaporation. Everything is great. Again, as we said before, though, if it doesn't go well and our body temperature increases above normal, then we may go into hypothermia, which is not good. Okay? And that's exactly what we just talked about, hypothermia, which is the elevated internal body temperature. So losses vary widely and depend also on the individual. And heat acclimatization is something that helps out with this, and I want to make a comment right here. So every year, as we move from winter to spring to summer, and then to fall to winter, and all over again, our body starts getting used to the new temperatures, right? So this happens every year, whether we want it or not, whether we realize it or not. Okay. But people who live more in hot environments, their body is more used to hot environments. See Texas. And people who live more in cold environments, they're used more in those environments. See northern country people, New Yorkers that live in Plattsburgh. But what is interesting for us, an exercise prescription is that, let's say we get a flight and we go from Plattsburgh right now, to Lima, Peru, or Sydney, Australia. I'm not even talking about the flight itself, but if we move from one hot environment to a cold environment or the other way around, and then we try to exercise there, then we may have issues. So that acclimatization is happening throughout the year. But here we're talking more about more rapidly, okay? And especially when you're exercising, you're pushing it anyway. Dehydration is an issue here, and we can know that you're dehydrated based on core temperature, HR, perceived exertion. Everything becomes harder, heart rate becomes higher, right? When you are hypohydrated, so below normal, you see that you have decreased sweating rate and decreased cutaneous blood flow. Okay, and you're doing that because you are hypohydrated, so your body is reacting that way. The big number here to remember is 2%. So if you are dehydrated 2% or more, there's a lot of evidence showing that will negatively affect your performance, especially endurance exercise performance. Okay? One way to figure out dehydration is body weight. Another way is urine count, right? And the third one is thirst. So back in the day, we just used to talk about urine count. Now we have 3 factors, and I want you to remember that. So in order to say that it's very likely somebody is dehydrated, we should have all 3 of them: weight loss, thirst, and dark urine count. Okay, 2 of them, problem. 1 of them, less problem. Okay, 3 factors. So we have all 3 of them, more likely you're dehydrated. Recommendation about fluid replacement before, during, and after. I want to stay here and talk a little bit about hyponatremia. Do you think that there's a thing such as drinking too much water? Well, the answer is yes. We didn't think to know that. We didn't think that there's a thing called drinking too much water. So like drink as much as you can, drink as much as you can, until some people die. And they die because of hyponatremia. So your P8, drinking just water. Water is hypotonic, right? It's a hypotonic drink, which means it will affect your pH levels. And it will start making it go lower and lower and lower. And hyponatremia has to do with what? Sodium, right? So it goes at that point where at cellular level, we don't have equilibrium anymore. And we can't function. And we'll see in a little bit that may even lead to cramps and so on and so forth. What I want you to remember here is that there is a thing called hyponatremia, and that's highly problematic. We don't want that, and that can definitely happen by drinking too much water. How can you stay hydrated and not um, um, lead yourself to hyponatremia? So, or your athletes use liquids that are hypertonic. Use liquids that have minerals, that have sodium in them. Don't just drink water. So those minerals, those liquids with those fluids with mineral are superior to water. Okay. So one thing you may have, we're going to talk about 4 things today, is heat cramps. Okay, as you can see, cause multifactorial. That means that could happen from a lot of things, right? Muscle fatigue is one, and neural excitability is another one. Neural excitability, and especially if you're taking PED214, you know that we need some electrolytes. Our nervous system, in order to chemically respond, needs to be in a specific status. Okay, so if it's not, then it cannot get excited or tweet or react, however you want to call it, in order to communicate the signal that goes from our head to our muscles and vice versa. So we have issues there with our nervous system. Okay. You said sodium is an issue with cramping. And if you are one of those people that are called heavy sweaters, right? Intentionally, you have to increase sodium while you're training and electrolytes. And of course, if something happens, they will give you intravenous fluid, which is something that, if it's available, will help you very much. Heat syncope. Temporary circulatory failure. Temporary circulatory failure. Why? Pooling of blood in the peripheral veins, particularly of the lower extremities. More common to physically unfit, sedentary, and non-acclimatized individuals. Standing erect for a long period of time, or cessation of strenuous, prolonged upright exercise. So what we're having here is pretty much we don't have enough oxygen going towards the brain. Okay? So, but if you lay down, come down, usually goes away fast. Heat exhaustion, more serious now. As we're going, we'll move to the second one, and now we'll move to the third one, you'll see that they're getting more and more serious, right? Heat exhaustion occurs during exercise or physical activity in the heat, when the body cannot sustain the level of cardiac output needed to support skin blood flow for thermoregulation and blood flow for metabolic requirements of exercise. So pretty much our heart and our circulatory system is not fit enough to do what it has to do to cover our needs during whatever exercise or physical activity we chose to do, to participate. Okay, so of course we'll see fatigue, we'll see weakness, and here we have hyperthermia. Okay, the the heat of our body is higher than normal. Okay, rehydration is important if you can. If you cannot, intravenous administration. Now the worst, exertional heat stroke. So here we have hyperthermia, like about above 40 Celsius or 104 Fahrenheit, severe nervous system dysfunction, most likely organ failure. You're in a delirium, so your nervous system really doesn't work very well. You're in a state that you don't really know what's going on or where we are. Right? You may think things happening. Convulsions are about mainly, there's a lot of twitching and movement in the muscles, most likely involuntary. Because we have convulsions with people have seizures. Usually we talk about convulsions and seizures. Here is not the same thing, but that's how it looks like. Right? Or even coma. Very high intensity. And here we'll have a new thing that I would like to for you to look it up. WBGT. Okay, I did, and I have my notes here. So the wet bulb globe temperature, you can go, you can just Google it, and you can go to I think weather.org and figure out what is going on with that and why it is a better measure, especially with high temperatures. So if you go there and you check, you'll see that this one is better, and I've already did it for Plattsburgh. I figured out the heat index, which is the maximum today is 42 for Plattsburgh, but the WBGT is 57, right? And I want you to consider heat index takes into consideration temperature and humidity, while the WBGT, the 57, takes into consideration temperature, humidity, plus wind speed, the sun angle, and the cloud cover. So which one is more complete, right? And I want you also to consider, what does it mean if the heat index is lower than WBGT? What does it mean if WBGT is lower than the heat index? Okay. Again, for Plattsburgh today, the heat index is 42, and for WBGT is 57. What does that mean? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? In any case, you see here that heat stroke can threaten our lives, so it's most likely we have to do something that is fast and helps with lowering the temperature. Okay, just as a measuring in the whole body. Exercise professional may use standards established by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health to define WBGT levels at which the risk of heat injury is increased by exercise may be performed. THR, again, target heart rate is very helpful there. Again, as we get used to it, of course, we can prescribe higher intensities. But in the very beginning, let's say, of course, we go somewhere that's really hot and we just move from Plattsburgh to there, right? Or from Alaska to there. 5 minutes may be enough. Okay. Make sure you're ready if something happens, especially with children and older adults. You can prescribe exercise to do it early in the morning or later in the evening, as we did when I was in Texas, for example, in the summer. If it's 110, 112 outside during around 2, 3 o'clock, why would you're telling your athletes to exercise really early or really late in the evening, so they avoid that, right? Something that I want you to remember as a motto here: optimize, but do not maximize fluid intake, because we said that we may have issues, right? So we're trying to increase performance. We're not trying to kill the other person. Everything should be taken under consideration. Of course, that's a lot of work, but especially if you're in a team setting. Allow at least 3 hours and preferably 6 hours so you have 2 sessions in the same day. There's nothing here that you cannot understand by yourselves. Again, as I said, this is an optimization of oral care anyway, but if something is more aggressive, like you going now to Mexico to train, that would be different. You will need up to 2 weeks. Concerning clothes, the wicking capacity that you see here has to do with humidity. And if you're doing anything outdoors, you know that that's what they advertise a lot. And the clothes, that capacity of the clothes is to move the humidity from the inner part of the clothing to the outer part, and just help you also to not accumulate sweat. Right. So the goal here is less. You're less. You end up. Your clothing is less wet, which helps with avoiding heat loss. Training is important of everybody involved, obviously. Signs, symptoms, what we need to do if we need to do something, how we can be proactive. And those are some questions that you can ask yourselves or your trainees, your athletes, or you can tell them to ask themselves. Nothing too fancy. All right. That was it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching and for being here. Again, office hours tomorrow from 8 to 12:30. LO 16 to 18 for next Sunday. And that's about it. I'll see you soon, guys. In the meantime, lift intentionally, not habitually.